We've all heard it. You need to create urgency. But what does that really mean? In this module, we break down what urgency actually looks like at each stage of the sales cycle and how the best reps create it without ever sounding desperate or pushy. Urgency isn't about speed, it's about momentum. This playbook breaks down how to create urgency at each stage of the sales cycle without pressure tactics. You'll learn how to guide buyers with clarity, uncover hidden timelines, and build urgency that feels natural, mutual, and buyer driven. Section 1, Early Stages of the Deal, Creating Future Pain. The goal in the early stage is to anchor the timeline by uncovering cost of inaction and aligning to business milestones. At this point in the deal, clarity becomes currency. Reps need to operate like project managers and trusted advisors, not just closers. They should help buyers envision the path to decision, spot obstacles before they appear, and stay one step ahead of internal friction. This is where precision and partnership drive urgency, not pressure. At this early stage of the deal, you should ask, what happens if this isn't solved by date or event? This question prompts the buyer to envision the impact of inaction tied to a real deadline, turning vague interest into tangible urgency. Next, tie pain to real consequences such as revenue impact, missed goals, and internal pressure. Help the buyer connect today's pain to tomorrow's outcomes. When they can quantify the impact, urgency becomes emotional and economic. Third, uncover key events such as fiscal year-end, product launch, or leadership changes. These are natural moments of pressure or transition that can help anchor urgency to real timelines already in motion inside the buyer's world. And finally, use buyer language to define what delay would mean to the customer and help them articulate the consequences in their own terms. When they describe the cost, the urgency becomes real. Next, let's look at signals of urgency. At this early stage, signals of urgency are often subtle but powerful. Look for signs that the buyer is beginning to take ownership of the process. Are they inviting more stakeholders? Are they proposing next steps before you ask? These moments tell you the buyer isn't just interested, they're invested. Look for prospects connecting timeline to internal objective. And lastly, keep an ear out for prospect mentioning negative impact of delay. These are all key signals that the buyer is starting to align with the opportunity. Let's look at tactical tools to use in the early stages. These are the practical reinforcements you can use to turn urgency from concept into conversation. Tools don't replace good instincts, but they can give you the structure and language to move the deal forward with confidence. Here are two that you could use at this early stage. First, a mutual action plan with milestone alignment. This is a shared timeline between rep and buyer that outlines every key step and milestone needed to close the deal, keeping both parties accountable and on track. Second one, cost of doing nothing calculator. This is calculated by estimating the financial impact of a buyer's current problem over time, then comparing that to the investment and ROI of your solution. Okay, now that you have the structure for creating urgency, let's play it out in a real-life scenario. You're speaking with the director of marketing at a B2B SaaS company. They're exploring your marketing automation platform. You discover their contract with a competitor ends in 60 days. You ask, what happens if this isn't replaced before Q4 planning starts? They reveal they'd lose reporting continuity and campaign momentum, which could derail their lead gen targets. You've just created urgency through future pain alignment. Now let's move on to the next stage of the deal that involves aligning stakeholders to urgency. Section 2, mid-stage of the deal, aligning stakeholders around urgency. The goal at this stage is to turn internal consensus into forward motion. The early spark is lit, but now you need more fuel. At this stage, deals often stall not because of lack of interest, but because of misalignment inside the buyer's organization. Your job is to shift from selling the product to guiding the team. Who has influence? Who has objections? Who's feeling the pressure and who's pretending there isn't any? Creative hunters know how to build urgency by connecting the dots across teams, aligning outcomes to broader company goals, and giving champions the tools they need to evangelize internally. Urgency at this stage is political, emotional, and strategic. It's about building momentum inside rooms you're not in. At this point, you should identify champions and skeptics early. Knowing who supports the initiative and who might resist it helps your rep tailor the conversation and build momentum strategically. Next, have your rep ask the customer, what's at stake if we miss this window? This question pushes the buyer to think beyond the demo and into the downstream consequences of inaction, surfacing internal pressures or missed opportunities that may not be obvious up front. Next, anchor urgency to broader team goals, like hitting a product launch deadline, improving forecasting accuracy, or aligning with board level growth initiatives. And lastly, map buyer org's sense of urgency. Who owns what and who feels pressure? Help your reps understand how urgency is distributed across the org chart. Who's feeling internal pressure to act? Who has the authority to move budget or timelines? Mapping this out helps reps navigate the political landscape of the deal. Signals of urgency at mid-stage. This is where urgency becomes observable. The shift from passive curiosity to active engagement begins here. If you're watching closely, you'll notice when a buyer starts taking initiative, looping in decision makers, or asking about timelines without being prompted. These are the signs that they're stepping toward ownership and that urgency is taking root. Look for 1, multiple stakeholders engaging, and 2, buyer starts driving next steps. Let's once again take a look at tactical tools at the mid-stage of the deal. First, build a champion toolkit, one-pagers or case studies to share internally. These give your internal advocates the credibility and clarity they need to explain your value when you're not in the room, helping them spark alignment across stakeholders. And second, influence maps tied to pain timelines. These help reps visualize key decision makers and influencers across the organization and align each one's concerns to the specific pain your solution addresses. It gives your champion a strategic path to internal alignment. Let's look at a mid-stage scenario. Your champion in RevOps at a mid-market SaaS firm is excited about your forecasting tool, but legal and finance haven't engaged yet. You ask, if this doesn't go live before your board meeting in 6 weeks, how does that impact planning? She replies, we'll have to rely on spreadsheets again, and last time the CFO lost trust in our projections. Now the entire buying committee has a shared sense of urgency. Section 3, late stage of the deal, driving momentum without pressure. The goal at this stage is to remove friction and accelerate the path to decision. This is the moment where most deals drift or close. The buyer's interested. The business case is strong. But time starts to slip, and silence creeps in. This is where creative hunters shine. Instead of pushing, they clarify. They uncover hidden blockers, navigate internal red tape, align on a close plan that isn't just seller-driven, it's mutual. Urgency here is about confidence. It's about giving the buyer the tools, the timeline, and the trust to say, we're ready. Because at this stage, your job isn't to press. It's to guide the buyer across the finish line without ever making them feel chased. We've finally gotten to the last stage of the deal. At this stage, you should use time-bound next steps with buyer-approved timelines. These steps should be clearly agreed upon by both parties, tied to shared goals or events, and designed to maintain momentum without creating pressure. Reconfirm mutual urgency and remaining priorities. This is where you realign with your buyer on why this matters now and what's still essential to them. It's a pulse check to make sure nothing has changed, and you're still tracking toward the same finish line together. Next, have the rep ask, is anything preventing us from moving forward this quarter? This question uncovers hidden blockers while reinforcing the agreed timeline, giving the buyer space to surface concerns without feeling cornered. And lastly, identify legal, procurement, and red tape early. These are the silent killers of late-stage deals. Encourage reps to bring these up proactively to prevent last-minute delays and keep the close plan on track. Late-stage urgency sounds different. It's when the buyer starts acting like a co-owner of the process. They begin suggesting next steps, asking for contract reviews, and clearing paths internally. These are the signs that they're moving from consideration to commitment. First sign, buyer brings up internal urgency unprompted. When urgency is real, the buyer starts voicing it without being asked. This could sound like, we need this live before our next planning cycle, or leadership is asking for updates. It's a strong indicator they're now owning the timeline. Next, clear commitment to next meeting, timeline, or contract steps. When a buyer confirms specific dates or actions without hesitation, it shows they're prioritizing progress and have buy-in to move forward. And lastly, buyer confirms internal alignment or outlines approval steps without being prompted. This is a strong sign that your champion is gaining traction internally and that the deal is becoming a shared priority within the organization. Let's take a look at tactical tools for late-stage deals. This is where reps translate urgency into action. These tools are the bridge between what buyers care about and how your solution fits into their timeline. They bring structure to the sales process, reinforce value, and create momentum without relying on pressure. First, develop a mutual close plan with shared ownership with your customer. This is a collaborative roadmap that outlines exactly how both buyer and seller will move from intent to signed agreement. It creates clarity, distributes responsibility, and helps prevent last-minute surprises or delays. Next, consider risk reversal offers like paid pilots or phased rollouts. These strategies reduce perceived risk for the buyer, offering a safe, low-commitment way to get started and build confidence in the solution before scaling. And lastly, time-sensitive triggers. Leverage moments like end-of-quarter pressure, fiscal year budgeting cycles, or pending funding expiration to create urgency. These deadlines introduce natural momentum and provide a compelling reason to act now rather than wait. Let's take a look at a final late-stage scenario. You're working with an IT director at a growing SaaS startup. The VP of engineering wants the onboarding platform implemented before the next engineering cohort joins. Procurement hits a delay. You create a mutual close plan, showing that if legal red lines are resolved within the week, your team can deploy in time for onboarding, and the buyer avoids a delayed ramp and shadow IT workarounds. You didn't pressure, you mapped urgency to their reality. Final thought, urgency isn't about being pushy. It's about presence. It's about timing. And it's about trust. Buyers don't move because you want them to. They move when the cost of waiting becomes clear and the path forward feels certain. That's your job as a creative hunter, to show the gap, build the bridge, and walk the buyer across it. Not with pressure, with partnership. Train your team to guide, not chase, lead, not push, and always sell forward, not fast. Train your team to guide, not chase, lead, not pressure. The best creative hunters don't sell fast. They sell forward. Thanks for following along in the Creating Urgency module. If this resonated, there's more where that came from. I offer one-on-one coaching, team training sessions, and a Creative Hunter live course cohort. A deep dive into tactical tools and real-world examples designed to keep you sharp and ahead of the game. Interested? Stay tuned. Details on the upcoming Maven cohort session are coming your way soon. Let's keep building better sellers together. Happy hunting!